going to talk about integrated curriculum mapping and what it looks like when you have to integrate all the different subjects. About 2 weeks ago, I went ahead and I asked you guys to create a survey that would go ahead and let us know what are the needs for professional development at our school site. Many of you guys came back with this same interest, professional development in curriculum mapping. Over 60% of you guys asked for professional development. Today, what you're going to have a chance to do is you're going to be able to gain the skills and the resources needed to build an integrated curriculum map using our English Language Arts program as the foundation. Now, when we were taking the survey, you wanted to know how science, social studies, technology, how do we get it all together? Today, that is going to be our purpose, to go ahead and to give you the resources, the skills, to be able to take back to your other grade level colleagues to build that curriculum map. As we said earlier, why are we having this? 60% of the staff showed an interest in creating a curriculum map that organizes the curriculum in a more time-efficient manner, as well as integrates the subject matter to build relevance and interest to the students. Now let's go back to time-efficient manner. Every week we create lesson plans. I don't know about you, but it takes me hours to create a lesson plan. In fact, the other day I had a student teacher in my classroom, and she was telling me how when she first came in, she felt like my lesson plans were kind of choppy. She couldn't understand. Wait, you're teaching language arts. Wait, no, you're teaching science, social studies. Hold on, I don't understand what we're teaching. And for a couple weeks, she kind of watched, and then she noticed that I had been integrating the science, the social studies, the technology into the curriculum. Hopefully today, by using a curriculum map, when you create your lesson plans, you'll be able to use those same strategies to create integrated lessons that at the initial point will go ahead and take you a little bit more time, but in your delivery to your students will be time effective. When you have 10 different standards that you need to get in both language arts, in social studies, in science, and incorporating technology, how do you get them all in 1 hour lesson? You can't do it. So by using a curriculum map, you're going to be able to do all of that. So the second part is making sure that it's relevant and building interest to the students. If we isolate our lessons to be about one subject, it doesn't mean anything. It's like a student being out on the playground by themselves. They really can't do a lot. But when they go ahead and they bring their friends in, and when they go ahead and they're playing with different pieces of equipment, it becomes more engaging. It becomes more meaningful. And the same thing happens in our lessons. When we go ahead and we grab different pieces, then we're able to go ahead and create those meaningful, connecting, intriguing lessons that our students go home and they talk about. So that brings us to our needs. Now, as we go through building a curriculum map, I want us to keep in mind 5 major questions. Number 1, what are the components of a curriculum map? We know about a pacing guide, when we're supposed to teach it, when the interim is supposed to be given to the students, but when and how are the components of a curriculum map aligned with the pacing guide that we already received through the district? Second, how can teachers build a curriculum that fits in all the subjects and not run out of time? We just talked about that a little bit. By integrating our subjects, we're going to be able to do that. Instead of teaching just on animals and language arts and their habitats, we're going to go ahead and figure out what chapter in science, what chapter in social studies, habitats, are we going to be able to pull together and make it one big idea that we teach. Number 3, where does a pacing guide fit in? That kind of goes back to number 1. How do you line the standards in with the pacing and integrate all at the same time? Number 4, how can science, social studies, and technology be integrated into the curriculum? And number 5, how can a curriculum map support the upcoming year standards? Now, what does that mean? When you're creating a curriculum map at the beginning of the year, the first thing you want to do is figure out what are your students coming in, what do they already know? Once you've got those prerequisite items established, you can dive right into your current grade level standards and build that curriculum map. The end of the year comes and you're running out of the standards. That's when you can start plugging into the upcoming school year standards. And you can use those last couple of weeks to kind of build a initial foundation for the students so that when they do go into the next grade level, they've kind of been front loaded, maybe with just a piece or a taste of some of the things that they're going to see next year. Now, friends, we're going to go ahead and give you just a couple of minutes. We've talked about how we need to have science, we need to have social studies, we need to have technology integrated into our curriculum. But if you were to sit down with your colleagues and you were to go ahead and look at all of the different standards for language arts, all of the standards for science, all the standards for social studies, and how the technology components are integrated, what are some of the things that you absolutely would want to have? We know that pacing is real important. We know assessments are real important. And absolutely, you're going to continue to weave those into your curriculum map. But would you want the standards to be itemized? How would you formulate the big ideas? How do you go about segmenting and categorizing and chunking everything together so that it becomes relevant and even quick and easy for you to use in your lesson planning? I'm going to give you about 10 minutes because I know that your time is important to go ahead and talk with your cross-grade level colleagues. In that time, I want you to talk about what you think a curriculum map would look like. All right, everyone. Now that we've had a chance to go ahead and talk with our colleagues about what we think a cross-curriculum curriculum map would look like, we're going to go ahead and talk about what are the things you would have in your map. Number one, we know that we have to have science, social studies, and technology. And we know that in order to create a curriculum map that is relevant, we need to have it built on a big idea. So let's go ahead and share out what are some of the parts of an integrated curriculum map. Awesome job sharing out. Some of the ideas we had were units of study. If again, let's go back to our animals. If in language arts we are talking about animals, then it's important that we go ahead and we look through our new generation science standards and figure out in what chapter or what unit are we going to be talking about animals. Yes, it might not line up. It may be that we're on chapter 4 in language arts, but in science it's chapter 10 for animals. That's okay. We can go ahead and cross those chapters together because it's important that we make sure that we aren't looking at just lining up the numbers, but we're making our lessons relevant to our students. And if we're going to be talking about animals, we should have animals being spoken about in language arts, we should have it in science, and then if we're going to go to social studies, we can talk about different kind of habitats. Social studies has to do with mapping. Why not talk about the different kind of mountains, the deserts that animals do live in, and where would those animals live if we were to look at a mountainous region? So we can go ahead and build that. Then you take it one step further. Take it technology. Go ahead and show them. Scholastic News has wonderful resources when it comes to showing habitats or different kind of animals and where they live. Use those resources, pull it together so that you again are focusing on this big idea. The next thing some of you guys shared out was focus standards. If I go back to my language arts book, which I'm going to grab right here, and I look at the scope and sequence, there are so many. It is almost impossible to get all of it. So it's important that I chunk my information. If I'm going to be talking about animals, that would be a really great time to pull in nouns, because we know nouns are person, places, things, and animals. So I'm going to bring in my nouns. Now for maybe our upper graders, You might want to go ahead and do some kind of research project on animals, therefore going ahead and using technology. So building in our standards so that we're not itemizing each lesson around one standard, but we're consolidating those standards so that it relates back to the big idea. And the next thing was websites. We just talked about how Scholastic News, I know that National Geographic, even our fun sites that our kids love, ABCA and Starfall, all of those great primary websites, those are great resources for our kids to get exposed to. So they are getting that big idea, those standards. Just go ahead and present it to them in a different way. Also, excuse me, friends. Also, it takes the light off of you. As a teacher, we're talking all day. We're watching our friends talk all day. By utilizing the computer, by utilizing the websites, by utilizing other sources that are not us, the kids are engaged. They're interested. They feel like they're going to the movie theater. So like today when I was teaching about St. Patrick's Day, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Wow, what a great time to talk about the classics. So in between our lessons, I went ahead and I played Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I went ahead and played, If I Only Had a Heart, If I Only Had the Nerve. I played those as transitions between my lessons. So my transition time wasn't about me today, but I took technology and bringing in those songs, bringing in the classics. My kids were engaged in something a little bit different, and they're probably going to go home and talk to mom and dad about it. And then the last one you guys shared about was adjustability. A curriculum map is a living document. It is not a document that once you've got it created and you run it off, you're going to stick with that year after year after year. It is important that every year, I would even suggest every trimester, go back, take time to reflect on it. Do you want to keep those big ideas? Do those units of study line up with the big ideas accordingly? Were there some other resources that you thought of after you taught it that you go, wait, I'm going to go ahead and include that? When it comes to the focus standards, maybe you realize that wasn't a good idea. So, friends, I go ahead and I encourage you to go ahead and look at all of those areas when you're doing a curriculum map. Now, friends, that we've talked about some of the things that we should have on a curriculum map, I want us to go back and look at our textbooks, our TEs, and I want us to look at what are the areas that we could start off with. Earlier when we were talking about the units of study and the focus standards, I kind of brought in our language arts component. This is the foundation of which we are going to create our curriculum maps. Using our program that has been chunked into 6 units, we can develop a curriculum map for every unit of study. Now they are long, and I understand they are detailed. But if we invest the time in it now, when it comes to that lesson planning that we talked about earlier, we're going to be able to get more excitement for our effort with our students. Now, when it comes to formulating a curriculum map, you want to go ahead and look at your big idea. You want to look at what are the key standards that we know our students need to know going into the next grade level. What are the key standards that our students need to know for our district interims? What are the key standards that our district needs to know for the state assessments? Those are the foundation building blocks to building a curriculum map. The second thing we want to do is, now that we've got language arts built as our foundation, is we want to grab the standards from science, social studies, using the big ideas of science, taking first grade as an example because I'm a first grade teacher. As a first grade teacher in science, we are studying plant life. I know that in Unit 3 in language arts, we study plant life, how things grow. So I'm going to chunk those big ideas together and I'm going to line them up on my map. I'm also going to look at history.